Julian Hart sat in his sleek, modern apartment overlooking the skyline of New York City, the sun dipping below the horizon and casting a warm golden hue over the buildings. He stared blankly at the city lights flickering to life, feeling an emptiness that seemed to resonate through every corner of his being. Just a few weeks ago, he had been on top of the world, successful in his career, admired by peers, and in a relationship that he thought would last forever. But everything had crumbled when Marcus Kane, his charming yet manipulative ex-boyfriend, had betrayed him in a way that left scars deeper than he cared to admit. The memories flooded back unbidden. Marcus's laughter echoing in their apartment, the way he would wrap his arms around Julian, making him feel invincible. But that was before the betrayal, the late-night phone calls, the whispered secrets. Julian had confronted Marcus only to be met with denials and excuses that felt more like daggers than words. The pain of that moment still lingered like a shadow over him as he sat there, lost in thought. Elliot Rivers entered the room quietly. Elliot had been with Julian for years, not just as a servant, but as a steadfast presence in his life. He was always there to pick up the pieces when Julian fell apart. His loyal companion who knew how to navigate the emotional storms brewing inside him. With tousled hair and a gentle smile, Elliot brought warmth into Julian's cold world. "Dinner's ready," Elliot said softly, breaking the silence. His voice was soothing, like a balm on Julian's troubled heart. He placed a beautifully arranged plate on the table, grilled salmon with asparagus and a hint of lemon. It was one of Julian's favorites, but tonight it felt tasteless. "Thanks," Julian replied absent-mindedly, forcing himself to take a bite while avoiding Elliot's gaze. He could feel Elliot's concern radiating from him like heat from a flame. It was both comforting and suffocating. "Are you okay?" Elliot asked after a moment of silence. His eyes were filled with genuine concern, but Julian couldn't bear to look at them. It was too complicated. Too many emotions swirled within him. Grief for what he had lost and guilt for what he felt for Elliot. "I'm fine," Julian snapped, perhaps too harshly. The words hung in the air between them, like an uninvited guest. He instantly regretted his tone. Elliot didn't deserve it. Elliot's expression shifted slightly, hurt flashing across his features before he masked it with a polite smile. "If you need anything, I'm here," he said quietly before retreating to the kitchen. Julian sighed deeply, feeling the weight of his own walls closing in around him. He knew Elliot cared for him deeply. They had shared countless moments together, laughs over breakfast, late-night talks about dreams and fears, but Julian had always kept a distance, afraid to let anyone too close after Marcus, as he finished his meal in silence. Julian couldn't shake off the feeling that something precious was slipping away from him, not just his relationship with Marcus, but also the bond he shared with Elliot. There was an unspoken connection between them that Julian had always ignored, fearing it would lead him down a path he wasn't ready to explore. Later that evening, after dinner was cleared away and night enveloped the city outside, Julian found himself wandering into his art studio, a space filled with canvases and brushes that had once inspired him but now felt like a reminder of everything he had lost. He stood before an unfinished canvas, a swirl of colors representing chaos and confusion, and picked up a brush. With each stroke, he poured out his emotions onto the canvas. Anger at Marcus for betraying him, sadness for what could have been, and an inexplicable longing for something more, something he couldn't quite name yet. Just then, Elliot entered quietly again, leaning against the doorframe as he watched Julian paint. "You used to love this," Elliot said softly. Julian paused and looked up at him. "I don't know if I can anymore." Elliot stepped closer, concern etched on his face. "You can find joy again if you let yourself." Julian felt something shift within him at those words. A flicker of hope mingled with fear. "What if I can't?" he asked quietly. "Then I'll be here," Elliot replied sincerely. "No matter what." In that moment, as their eyes locked, Julian felt an undeniable pull toward Elliot, a connection that went beyond friendship or loyalty. It terrified him, yet intrigued him all at once. But just as quickly as it came, Julian pushed those thoughts aside. He couldn't afford to complicate things further. Not now, when everything felt so fragile. Thanks for being here, Julian said finally, breaking eye contact and returning to his canvas. Elliot nodded slowly, but didn't move away. Instead, he remained close by, as if offering silent support. And for the first time in weeks, Julian felt a flicker of warmth amidst the coldness surrounding him. A small reminder that perhaps not all hope was lost. The night wore on as they worked side by side in silence. The artist lost in his thoughts while the servant stood vigilantly by his side. The morning sun streamed through the large windows of Julian's apartment, casting soft rays across the room. I woke up feeling a strange mix of anxiety and anticipation. Today was the day of Elliot's art exhibition, a moment he had worked tirelessly for, and I was determined to support him. Yet, beneath that determination lay a nagging sense of dread. What if I couldn't handle seeing him shine in a way that made me feel small? As I prepared for the day, my mind drifted back to last night's conversation. Elliot had been so genuine, so open, and it had struck a chord deep within me. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more between us, something I had been too afraid to acknowledge. But today wasn't about me. It was about Elliot. That I dressed carefully, choosing a tailored navy suit that made me feel confident yet approachable. As I glanced in the mirror, I practiced a smile, hoping it would mask the turmoil inside. After all, I wanted to be there for Elliot to celebrate his success. Elliot had spent weeks preparing for this exhibition, pouring his heart into every brushstroke on canvas. He had invited a small group of friends and art enthusiasts, but I knew how much it meant for him to have me there. I could almost hear his nervous laughter as he spoke about his work, how he saw the world through colors and shapes that often eluded others. When I arrived at the gallery, the atmosphere buzzed with excitement. The walls were adorned with Elliot's paintings, each piece vibrant and alive, telling stories of hope, despair, and everything in between. I felt a swell of pride as I walked through the space. These are not just paintings, but fragments of Elliot's soul laid bare for everyone to see. As I moved from one piece to another, I lost track of time. Each painting seemed to draw me in deeper. A swirling storm of blues and grays depicting loneliness, a bright explosion of yellows and oranges capturing joy. It was as if Elliot had captured every emotion I had ever felt but couldn't express. Julian, a familiar voice broke my reverie. It was Lila, my childhood friend and business partner. She approached me with her usual enthusiasm, her dark curls bouncing as she walked. "Hey, you made it," I replied, forcing a smile despite my racing thoughts. "Of course. I wouldn't miss this for the world," she said, glancing around at the artwork. "Elliot has really outdone himself." "I know," I said quietly, still absorbing the beauty around me. Lila studied me for a moment before her expression shifted to concern. "You okay? You seem distant." I shrugged, unsure of how to articulate what was swirling inside me. "Just thinking about how talented Elliot is." "Have you told him?" she pressed gently. "No," I admitted, feeling a pang of regret. "I don't know how." "Maybe you should," she suggested with a knowing smile. "He needs to hear it." Before I could respond, Elliot appeared from behind a crowd of admirers, his face lighting up when he spotted me. He wore an artfully casual outfit, a fitted shirt rolled up at the sleeves and dark jeans that accentuated his lean frame. My heart raced as he approached. "Julian, you came." His voice was filled with genuine surprise and delight. "I wouldn't miss it for anything," I replied, trying to keep my tone light despite my nerves. Elliot beamed as he gestured toward one of his paintings, a large canvas filled with swirling colors that seemed to dance across the surface. This one is called Chaos and Clarity. It represents how life can feel overwhelming but still hold beauty. "It's incredible," I said sincerely, stepping closer to examine it more closely. "You've really captured something special here." Elliot's eyes sparkled with gratitude as he watched my reaction. "Thank you. That means so much coming from you." As we stood side by side admiring his work, a warmth enveloped us, a shared moment that felt electric yet fragile. The noise around us faded into the background as we became lost in our own world. But then Marcus entered the gallery like a storm cloud rolling in on a sunny day. He exuded confidence in his tailored suit and flashed that disarming smile that had once captivated me so completely. My stomach twisted at the sight of him. He always had this uncanny ability to disrupt everything. "Julian, fancy seeing you here," Marcus said smoothly as he approached us. "Marcus," I replied curtly, trying to maintain composure while Elliot shifted slightly beside me. "I see you're supporting your little friend's art show," Marcus said with feigned enthusiasm while his eyes flicked over Elliot dismissively. Elliot stood taller, but remained quiet, clearly uncomfortable under Marcus's scrutiny. "His work is exceptional," I said defensively, feeling protective over Elliot in that emo. The night of the exhibition faded into a blur of colors and laughter, but the memory of Elliot's radiant smile lingered in my mind long after the last guest had left. I found myself replaying our conversations, the way his eyes lit up when he spoke about his art, and how he had stood tall against Marcus's taunts. That evening had felt like a turning point, a moment where I could almost see the possibility of something more between you. As the days passed, I noticed a subtle shift in our dynamic. Elliot seemed more confident, his laughter more frequent, and I couldn't help but feel that my presence was bolstering him. Yet, beneath that newfound confidence lay an unspoken tension, a growing awareness of the feelings we both harbored but hadn't yet acknowledged. One afternoon, as I sat in my office overlooking the bustling streets of Manhattan, I received a text from Elliot. "Can we talk? I need your advice." My heart raced at the thought of him reaching out to me. It was a simple request, yet it felt monumental that I quickly replied, suggesting we meet at a nearby cafe known for its cozy atmosphere and excellent coffee. The thought of seeing him filled me with a mix of excitement and anxiety. What would he possibly want to discuss? When I arrived at the cafe, I spotted Elliot sitting at a corner table, his fingers nervously tapping against his cup. He looked up as I approached, and I could see the flicker of apprehension in his eyes. "Hey," I greeted him with a warm smile as I slid into the seat across from him. "You okay?" "Yeah, just thinking," he replied, running a hand through his hair, a gesture that always made my heart skip a beat. I leaned in slightly, sensing the weight of whatever was on his mind. "What's going on?" Elliot took a deep breath before speaking. "I've been offered an opportunity to showcase my work at a larger gallery downtown. It's a big deal, but I don't know if I'm ready." My heart swelled with pride for him. "That's amazing. You should definitely go for it." He shook his head, looking down at his coffee cup. "It's not that simple. What if people don't like my work? What if they compare me to others and find me lacking?" "Elliot," I said softly, reaching across the table to place my hand over his. "You have an incredible talent. Your work speaks for itself. You can't let fear hold you back." He looked up at me then, and in that moment, our eyes locked with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. "It's not just about the art," he admitted quietly. "It's about feeling worthy enough to be there, to be seen." The vulnerability in his voice struck me deeply. It was as if he had peeled back layers of himself that he usually kept hidden. "You are worthy," I said firmly. "You deserve every bit of success that comes your way." Elliot smiled faintly but still seemed unconvinced. "What if it doesn't go well? What if people don't see what I see?" "Then you learn from it," I replied passionately. "Every artist faces rejection at some point. It's part of the journey. But you'll never know unless you take that leap." He nodded slowly, absorbing my words as he gazed out the window at the bustling street beyond us. "I wish I had your confidence," he murmured. That I felt an urge to reach out and reassure him further, but hesitated for fear of crossing an invisible line between us. Instead, I leaned back slightly and tried to lighten the mood. "Well, you've got me cheering for you from the sidelines." Elliot chuckled softly at that, and the tension between us began to ease just a little bit. "Thanks for being my biggest fan," he said playfully as our conversation shifted back to lighter topics. Favorite movies and silly childhood memories. I couldn't shake off the feeling that we were teetering on the edge of something significant. After finishing our drinks, Elliot seemed more animated than when we first arrived. He was still apprehensive about the gallery opportunity, but had agreed to give it serious consideration. As we walked out into the crisp afternoon air together, I felt a sense of hope blossoming within me. Elliot said suddenly as we reached the corner where we would part ways for the day. He turned to face me directly, his expression earnest and open. Thank you for always believing in me. I smiled warmly at him, feeling warmth spread through my chest at his words. You don't need to thank me. You're talented enough to believe in yourself, too. He hesitated for a moment before speaking again, almost shyly. Can we meet again tomorrow? Maybe talk more about everything. Of course, I replied without hesitation, excitement bubbling inside me at the prospect of spending more time together. As we exchanged goodbyes and went our separate ways, I couldn't shake off the feeling that this was more than just friendship. It was something deeper waiting to be explored that night as I lay in bed staring up at the ceiling. Thoughts raced through my mind like wildfire. Thoughts about Elliot's art, his dreams, and what lay ahead for us both. I realized then that this journey we were on together was only just beginning. The following day, I found myself pacing my apartment, anticipation coursing through me like electricity. Elliot and I had agreed to meet again, and I felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. What would we talk about? Would he share more about his art? Or perhaps he would finally voice the feelings that had been simmering between us since the exhibition. When the clock struck 3, I made my way to our usual cafe, my heart racing with each step. The familiar bell chimed as I entered, and I scanned the room until my eyes landed on Elliot sitting at our favorite table by the window. He looked deep in thought, his brow furrowed slightly as he absently traced patterns on the table with his fingers. Hey, I greeted him as I approached, trying to mask my nervousness with a smile. Elliot looked up and smiled back, though there was a hint of apprehension in his expression. Hey, thanks for coming. Of course. I wouldn't miss it, I replied, sliding into the seat across from him. How are you feeling about the gallery opportunity? He took a deep breath and leaned back in his chair. I'm still nervous, but after yesterday, I've been thinking maybe I should just go for it. What's the worst that could happen? That's the spirit. I encouraged him, feeling a surge of pride for his determination. You have so much talent. You deserve to be seen. Elliot nodded slowly, but didn't seem entirely convinced. I just wish I could shake off this fear of failure. Failure is part of growth, I said earnestly. Every artist faces it at some point. What matters is how you respond to it. He smiled faintly, but there was still a shadow of doubt in his eyes. I know you're right. It's just hard to believe sometimes. As we sipped our coffees, our conversation shifted from art to lighter topics. Favorite movies, travel dreams, and childhood memories that made us laugh. With each shared story, the tension between us began to dissolve, replaced by an easy camaraderie that felt both comforting and exhilarating. But as we talked, I couldn't shake the feeling that something unspoken loomed over us. There was a weight in the air, a palpable energy that hinted at deeper emotions waiting to be acknowledged. After finishing our drinks, Elliot glanced out the window thoughtfully before turning back to me. Julian, can I ask you something? Of course, I replied, my heart racing at the seriousness in his tone. What do you think about relationships? He asked hesitantly. The question caught me off guard. Relationships? Like romantic ones? He nodded slowly, his gaze steady on mine. Yeah. Do you think they're worth pursuing, even when there's a risk of getting hurt? I considered his question carefully. I think they could be incredibly rewarding if both people are willing to be vulnerable and honest with each other, I said slowly. But yes, there's always a risk involved. Elliot bit his lip as if weighing my words. What if someone has been hurt before? What if they're scared of opening up again? Then they need someone who understands their fears. I replied softly, feeling an undeniable connection growing stronger between us. Someone who can help them heal. He looked down at the table for a moment before meeting my gaze again. And what if that someone is right in front of them? My heart skipped a beat at his words. It felt as if he were speaking directly about us, without saying it outright. The air around us thickened with unspoken possibilities. I started cautiously, searching for the right words. I think sometimes we have to take risks for what we truly want. Elliot's expression shifted. Hope flickered in his eyes as he leaned closer across the table. What if what we want is each other? The vulnerability in his voice sent shivers down my spine. For a moment, time seemed to stand still as we locked eyes. his gaze searching mine for answers. I want that too, I admitted softly, feeling an overwhelming rush of emotions flooding through me. Elliot's breath caught slightly as he processed my words. Then he smiled, a beautiful smile filled with relief and joy. Really? He asked incredulously. Yes, I confirmed firmly. I've been trying to figure out how to say it without scaring you away. Scaring me away? Elliot chuckled softly, shaking his head in disbelief. You could never scare me away. In that moment, everything shifted between us. The tension transformed into something warm and inviting. It felt like stepping into sunlight after being lost in shadows for far too long. As we continued to talk about our feelings, our hopes and fears, I felt an exhilarating sense of freedom wash over me. We were no longer just Julian and Elliot, the businessman and the servant, but two souls connecting on a deeper level. By the time we left the cafe, hand in hand, it felt Lee. The days that followed our conversation at the cafe felt like a whirlwind of emotions. Elliot and I had crossed a line, and everything seemed brighter, more vibrant, as if the world around us had transformed into a canvas painted with new colors. Each moment spent together was filled with laughter and shared glances that lingered just a little too long, igniting sparks of something deeper. Elliot had decided to go for the gallery opportunity, and I couldn't have been prouder. He threw himself into his preparations, working late into the night on new pieces that reflected his growth as an artist. I offered my support in any way I could, whether it was helping him choose frames or simply being there to listen as he voiced his fears and dreams. One evening, as we sat in my apartment surrounded by sketches and paint tubes, Elliot looked particularly pensive. He had been staring at a blank canvas for far too long, and I could sense the weight of his thoughts pressing down on him. Hey, I said gently, breaking the silence. What's on your mind? He sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair in that familiar way that made my heart ache. I just want this exhibition to be perfect. What if people don't connect with my work? What if they don't see what I see? I moved closer, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Elliot, art is subjective. Not everyone will connect with every piece, but that doesn't diminish your talent or your voice. You've poured your heart into this. That's what matters. He looked up at me, his eyes searching mine for reassurance. You really believe that? Absolutely, I replied firmly. You have a gift, and this is your chance to share it with the world. Trust in yourself. Elliot smiled faintly, but still seemed uncertain. I just wish I could shake off this fear. Fear is natural, I said softly, but you can't let it hold you back from pursuing your dreams. As we continued to talk about his art, I felt an overwhelming urge to reach out and pull him into my arms, to show him just how much I believed in him, not only as an artist, but as a person deserving of love and happiness. But before I could act on that impulse, Elliot stood up abruptly, changing the subject. Let's take a break. How about we grab some dinner? Sounds great. I agreed eagerly. Relieved for the distraction, we decided on a small Italian restaurant nearby. One of our favorites where the aroma of fresh basil and garlic wafted through the air like a warm embrace. As we settled into our booth, the ambience felt cozy and intimate, perfect for what had become our new reality. Over plates of pasta and glasses of wine, we shared stories about our childhoods, how Elliot had always been drawn to art while I had spent countless hours dreaming of becoming a businessman. We laughed over silly memories and marveled at how far we had both come. But as the evening wore on, I noticed Elliot growing quieter again. The lightheartedness from earlier began to fade as he stared down at his plate. Elliot, I asked gently, concern creeping into my voice. What's wrong? He looked up at me with an expression that was both vulnerable and raw. I'm just scared. Scared of what? Scared of what happens after the exhibition, he admitted softly. What if it doesn't go well? What if it changes everything between us? His words hit me like a punch to the gut. The thought of losing what we had built together terrified me too. Yet I knew we couldn't let fear dictate our choices. Elliot, I said earnestly, reaching across the table to take his hand in mine. No matter what happens at the exhibition, it won't change how I feel about you. He searched my eyes for sincerity before nodding slowly. I want this to work between us, but what if it complicates things? What if we lose each other? We won't lose each other. I reassured him firmly. We're in this together, no matter what happens next. As Elliot squeezed my hand tightly, something shifted between us, a shared understanding that transcended words. In that moment, we both knew that love was worth the risk. After dinner, we decided to take a walk through Central Park under the soft glow of streetlights illuminating the path ahead. The air was crisp and refreshing. It felt like a new beginning as we strolled side by side, our fingers intertwined naturally, a gesture so simple yet profound that it sent warmth coursing through me. I've never felt this way about anyone before, Elliot confessed quietly after a few moments of comfortable silence. Me neither, I admitted honestly. It's terrifying, but also exhilarating. We paused near a small pond where ducks floated lazily on the water's surface, their reflections shimmering under the moonlight. The beauty of the moment enveloped us as we stood close together. I want you to know, Elliot said softly, turning to face me fully now, that no matter what happens with my art or anything else, you mean so much to me. My heart swelled at his words. They resonated deep within me, like music played on an old record player. Familiar, yet new all at once. I feel the same way, I replied earnestly, leaning closer until our foreheads almost touched. You're not just an artist. You're someone who inspires me every day. In that intimate space between us, time seemed to stand still as we leaned in closer until our lips met in a gentle kiss. A tender exploration filled with unspoken promises and shared dreams. We pulled away slowly, breathless, and smiling like fools in love. I knew without a doubt that whatever challenges lay ahead, whether they came from within ourselves or outside forces, we would face them together. The exhibition was just around the corner. It would be a test not only of Elliot's artistry, but also of our relationship. But standing there under the stars with him by my side made me believe that love could conquer all fears. The day of Elliot's exhibition finally arrived, and with it came a whirlwind of emotions. I woke up early, the sun barely peeking over the horizon, casting a soft glow across my apartment. My stomach churned with a mix of excitement and anxiety. I knew how much this meant to Elliot, and I wanted nothing more than for him to shine. I prepared for the evening. I dressed carefully in a crisp black suit that made me feel polished yet approachable. I wanted to support Elliot in every way possible, to show him that I believed in him wholeheartedly. My phone buzzed with a text from him. Can you come over before the exhibition? I need your help. I quickly replied, on my way, and headed out the door, my heart racing with anticipation. When I arrived at Elliot's apartment, he answered the door looking both nervous and excited. He wore a simple yet elegant shirt paired with dark jeans, his hair slightly tousled as if he had run his fingers through it in frustration. The moment he saw me, his face lit up, and I felt a rush of warmth. Hey, thanks for coming, he said, stepping aside to let me in. Wouldn't miss it for the world, I replied, giving him a reassuring smile. You ready? Elliot ran a hand through his hair again, glancing around his apartment as if searching for something. I think so. It's just, what if no one likes my work? Elliot, I said gently, taking his hands in mine. You've put your heart into this. No matter what happens tonight, you should be proud of yourself. He nodded slowly but still looked uncertain. I just wanted to go well. Then let's focus on that, I encouraged him. You've got this. After a few moments of quiet reassurance, we gathered his artwork and loaded it into my car. The drive to the gallery was filled with light conversation, but I could sense Elliot's anxiety bubbling beneath the surface. As we arrived at the venue, an elegant space filled with high ceilings and soft lighting, the reality of the night began to sink in. Elliot took a deep breath as we stepped inside. This is it, he said softly, evident in his voice as he surveyed the room filled with other artists setting up their work. Let's get your pieces displayed, I said, trying to keep the mood light as we unloaded his paintings. The gallery staff helped us set everything up, and soon Elliot's work was beautifully arranged on the walls. Each piece telling its own story. As guests began to arrive, Elliot's nervousness intensified. He fidgeted with his shirt cuffs and glanced around anxiously as people started to mingle. I could see how much he wanted validation, but was terrified of rejection. Just remember, I whispered as we stood together watching the crowd, you're not alone in this. He nodded, but remained tense. What if they don't connect with my art? Then they don't, I replied firmly. But some will. Trust me. The opening of the exhibition began with speeches from local art critics and gallery owners praising the talent on display. As Elliot listened intently, I could see his shoulders relax slightly. Perhaps he was beginning to feel the excitement of sharing his work rather than just fearing judgment. Finally, it was time for guests to explore the artwork. As they moved from piece to piece, I watched Elliot interact with them, his passion shining through as he explained the inspiration behind each painting. It was beautiful to see him come alive in front of others. He was no longer just my loyal friend, but an artist claiming his space in the world. As the evening progressed, people began to approach us more frequently, complimenting Elliot's work and expressing genuine interest in his creative process. Each positive comment seemed to lift some of the weight off his shoulders until he was practically glowing with pride. See, I said quietly after one particularly enthusiastic guest left our side. You're doing amazing. Elliot beamed at me then, truly beamed, as if my words had ignited something within him that had been dimmed by self-doubt. I can't believe this is happening.